Hey guys, welcome to this episode. Today we're going to be talking with John Visser, founder and owner of Darwin Digital Media, a marketing agency specifically built for building personal brands. John, to start off, what got you into wanting to focus on personal brands?
Oh, Weston, thank you very much for having me. Digital media has become such a huge and vast ocean with a lot of noise, right? And the question became, how do you cut through the noise eventually? If you look at a company, a big company like Walmart, I mean, they don't even sell their own products, but so why do people keep going to them? And the answer is branding, right? Another individual is like Grant Cardone. Some people, these guys specialize and they've built a good solid brand, and that helps them to leverage either the fan base or the customer base to increase their profits and to increase their revenue. So branding, it's not a magic bullet per se. It's a longer term strategy. But the difference between branding and between the next best thing is that branding is a long term sustainable marketing strategy to have.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's an interesting insight. I never really thought about that. You're correct. Walmart, they're not a producer of their own stuff. They're basically a
No,
reseller for the
yeah.
most part. In your experience, well, I guess as first, what got you into wanting to market brands? Because beforehand, you were doing other work, correct?
Yeah. So, for the viewers out there, like if you guys haven't picked up, I talk funny. I have an accent. I'm originally from South Africa, and residing now in Canada. And I grew up in a retail environment. And,
Hmm.
and in that sense, my dad was the same. He was an independent seller of multiple brands he had a tire business. Um, and so when we relocated to Canada, um, my other passion is also financing, right? And so that's kind of where I started with my businesses, and then my own business got to a point where it was ready to scale beyond the borders
Hmm.
of town that we lived in, right? And so now you start going into the realm of marketing and advertising, and then I don't know, and probably all the viewers that's watching this now have found that once you type in the Google search, you type in online marketing or selling online, your inbox, and once that algorithm picks it up, it gets flooded with, and 90% of this is just a bunch of nonsense, right? And so I have a bachelor's degree in business management, which coincidentally, I took marketing as a subject as well. And I just decided, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so I started digging into it myself. And, until I figured out, okay, but hang on, it all eventually boils down to branding. Um,
Hmm.
the time when the internet was still in its infant age, people got away with selling from the back end and without showing their face and just selling the product. But because it's
Yeah.
becoming so much, and so people have now gone back to, they want to see who they're dealing with. They actually want to
Hmm.
speak to the individual that they are going to give their money to. You can't just hide behind these things. And so that's where the marketing agency comes from. And then obviously, together with that, the third leg to this whole equation is selling, right?
Hmm.
People use marketing and sales interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. Marketing brings the prospects into the front door, sales closes the deal, but the one cannot live with the other.
Gotcha. So have you seen a change in the market to where, beforehand brand almost more as a corporation used to be, more powerful, and it seems like that's not as much, and more it's the individual that, kind of like you said, Grant Cardone or something like that. Have you seen a change in that direction?
Definitely with the internet, and especially it seemed to be there was a big push with COVID kind of forced, virtual communication gave it
Mm.
skyrocketed into the next era, right? And so now
Hmm.
a guy that's living in Zimbabwe or somebody that's living in Asia have access to markets in the US or have access to markets in Europe, right? And that immediately gives them a scale of economy that under normal circumstances you won't have. And, together with that, compared to that of big corporate companies that's got big overheads, like, the brick and mortar places that they got to hire, the wages that they got to deal with. The whole business model with virtual business models has changed and made it possible for smaller guy to compete on a worldwide and international scale.
Yeah. So your demeanor is very calm. Does that help you with, helping individuals kind of come out with their brand?
I think so. I one of the things I don't like doing is to make impulsive decisions, and so,
Mm.
yeah, I have I think I have a slight case of ADD because focus is not always my friend. So I found
Yeah.
when I was young, I found when I was younger that when I get interested in three or four things simultaneously. But before I, go ahead and pull the trigger on anything, I always now, would give it a 24 or a 36-hour time to just think about it. And so
Mm.
over the years, I kind of developed a skill that my strategic thinking is has become a lot better. And for strategic thinking, you need calm. It's not on the fly stuff. And so I think for that purpose, my calmness is resonating with a lot of people, like you say.
Yeah. And so what type of people do you typically try to look for? Are these people who already have a business and are trying to kind of pivot, or these people who are new to it?
So I get people from all walks of life. For instance, this morning before the show, I spoke to um, a startup company in the health space that is developing a new testing for the screening of lung cancer. And just
Mm.
after that, I spoke to a pharmaceutical company that is launching a new product, and they're now at a stage of production. But I also speak to a lot of coaches, and I kind of
Mm.
find that that's kind of where I resonate the best. Is like the smaller, and it's not like I don't want to spend time with big corporations, but
Yeah.
corporations that does excess of $50 million or $100 million in gross revenue, most of those companies already has an in-house
Yeah.
marketing department, right? Whereas your smaller medium-sized businesses, the owners are, what you'll find is they do operations, and they do marketing, and then they do their own finances, and now they get to a point where, okay, they need to be able to grow, but you only have so much time in a day. And so those kind of businesses are the ones, excuse me, where I find I can provide the most value.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Now, so in your process of helping, let's say, for example, a coach, helping them develop their personal brand, what do you find is unique about your process?
So I don't sell canned processes. I custom
Mm.
tailored, um, I custom tailored it, according to what the client's need is. Um, and I like to take my time. I want the potential client to feel, um, to get to know me first, right? To feel that
Yeah.
they can trust me. And so one of the ways I like to do that is I also host a TV segment called Buzzworthy Businesses. And
Mm.
that is a smaller podcast that's free for the prospect to come on to, where we feature the prospect feature them and frame their business and make it all about them. So they get exposure, which is nice for the business. And in return, they have the opportunity to work with me on a one-on-one basis and and to decide for themselves, is this a guy, do I like working with this guy? Do I like how he does things, right? And it's non-invasive, and it puts everybody at ease, because what you'll find is every time I do a quick discovery call, the first thing you need to do is, let that person know, like, I'm not here to pitch you. This is a natural progression because we're getting so much, again, we're getting so much of that. And buyers now are getting more sophisticated, right? People,
Yep.
and which is a good thing, right? But so for me, I'm focusing on building long-term relationships rather than seeing how fast I can make a sale.
Yeah. Well, and also what's unique about that is you're also, it sounds like you're trying to verify that it's a good match on both sides, right? I've seen lots of times where people, especially coaches, or individuals who are helping with marketing, they just hop into it. And like you said, they just have here's the process of how I do it. I'm going to apply it to everyone. And for some business models or some, industries, it just doesn't work that way. And so it's really unique that you're trying to take the time to position and make sure that it's a good match. So how has the Daily News Network podcast series, what kind of led to that? What started that?
So one of my business associates and good time old friend Greg Kirkham, this is a discussion that's been regularly coming up when we we're talking is to building long-term relationships is before, I would like to start by determining where the client is in their marketing strategy, to see what they're currently doing, what is working. Because if it's working, why do you want to fix it? Like that old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That stays true to today, right? So, and so, in our process, and then I got interviewed by Greg on a TV segment called, I think it was Digital Champions. I can't even remember.
Okay.
And so afterwards, he reached out to me and says, you looked really comfortable in front of the camera. Would you be interested in doing a segment yourself? And that was kind of my first introduction into podcasting. And I can tell you, the first time I was the host and not the guest, it was horrible. It was absolute. I ran out of questions. It was it was a completely different animal, right? But once you start doing it, it's that old thing. Once you start doing something by repetition, it becomes easier and easier. And now I've moving from a 5 to 7 minute podcast into a 30-minute hosting 30-minute podcast for people.
Okay. And so tell me about that. So it sounds like you ended up really liking kind of talking with people and having those personal conversations, that you're now starting your own podcast. And if I recall, it was called Pipeline to Profit.
Yes. And again, it focuses on the three variables that we talked about when we started today, right? It focuses on finances, it focuses on advertising and marketing, and it focuses on sales, right? Because you need all three to run in synchronization in order to grow. Like you need to watch your expenses so that you can have money to spend on advertising. And you need good, solid advertising and branding to bring people through the front door or through your website. And then you need a good sales process to convert them into long-term loyal customers.
Well, and that's also unique that you have that kind of finance side kind of joined in with it, because oftentimes, and I know you've seen this, where people come in with a marketing campaign and just, huge budget, and it's kind of irregardless of whether or not they know if they can get a return on that or not. But it sounds like you kind of approach it more of like, hey, what's going to get the best return, and kind of what's our level based off of that.
It's more than that. You're absolutely right. You need to scale with what the individual has as available in terms of resources. And the other thing is as well, when you talk resources, if somebody cannot accommodate 100 leads a month because they don't have the capacity to handle that, why do I want to go convince them to spend money to obtain those 100 leads? There's just no point in it, right? There's somebody who tells me, John, you know what? Let's scale. I want to get my closing ratios 50% or 30%, let's say 30%, would like to get 3 more clients in, then we know, all right, you need 10 qualified leads to do that, right? And that 10 qualified leads is going to cost you an X amount of money. If you're not, then, we scale it down, but then you need to be realistic about it and say, okay, by scaling down, it's going to take me longer to achieve the goal than somebody that has got the financial resources to invest in that, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, that's such a great way to approach it because you can do harm to your business by having too many leads that you're not following up on, and you get a negative perspective from individuals, right? And
Well,
so
and
that's
that's
such a smart way of approaching it.
yeah, and that's the problem, right? You get these marketers that would hype up the prospect and get them all emotional to pull the trigger, but once those lead flows start coming in and things start falling through the crack, the market, it's not his business anymore because he just moves on to the next lead. I would like to be there, grow with the client. For me, that alone gives me a lot more job satisfaction than just a quick buck.
Yeah, for sure. And probably, much better results because, not only
Yes.
are you approaching it with that kind of calm demeanor of let's figure it out, let's make sure the relationship's there, but also let's figure out, does the offering match the client? I mean, that's very impressive.
Well, thank you very
So
much.
talk to me a little bit about this pipeline to profit. What's the goal? What are you trying to do within that podcast?
So the goal is to have people with businesses come onto the podcast and to, whether they would like to talk a little bit about finances, or whether they would like to talk about sales, whether they would like to talk about marketing in their own business, or if they just want to talk about, about their own business like you and me are doing right now. That is where the podcast idea comes from, right? Also to allow them to almost create like like how you put it, like a natural funnel effect for their own buyers that they can process through there and eventually, become converting into long-term clients.
Okay, gotcha. So very similar to what you're already doing on the Daily News Network, but
Yeah.
longer form to give it more time to breathe and allow those conversations to grow.
Yeah, because on the Daily News Network, it's like sometimes we can have 3 different guests on there from 3 different industries, right? And the podcast is still only 5 to 7 minutes long. Now, the reason for the time frame there is you kind of start losing the audience after about 7 minutes. People need to go on with their lives.
Yeah.
The kids are screaming and the dogs are yelling and all the good stuff that happens in a normal day. But what I'm attempting with this podcast is, yes, these podcasts are going to be 30 minutes long, but these podcasts will be tailored to a specific message and to a specific stage in the sales funnel for the prospect who's coming onto this, and then, delivered into snippets that is easier consumed than having to sit through a 30-minute podcast, because I can do it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So talk to me a little bit about when you approach helping people with their brand, what's the thing that you see people get wrong most often?
Now, that's a good question. There's a big variety of. I think the big thing that I found on my end is when people say branding, people think the color of my logo or the color of my company or the type of logo that I have. And really, yes, I mean, there's market data that would suggest that certain colors attract certain people more. I mean, obviously, my own websites have that color coordination. So I'm not saying it does not, but at the end of the day, people want to see a face. They want to feel that this person is approachable. And they want to have access to actually be able to speak to that individual. And if you want proper branding, that, my friend, is the bottom line.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, because I mean, that's true. A lot of people stop at the idea of like, hey, what's the colors? What's the color palette? And it's like, oh, but it's so much more. It's who's the person.
Exactly.
Who's the person behind it? And what's the story that comes to mind from some of your past clients? And you don't have to kind of disclose details about it, but what are some changes that you've seen as you've helped individuals with their brand? Like, where was their business at before, and then afterwards, what happened?
It's an interesting thing to witness, because when you start going down that path and building the relationship and taking small changes, and these changes have different impacts for different people, right? But but the job satisfaction comes in to see how these changes positively can affect somebody's life. And everybody has got their own goals. For one individual, it might be to make more money. Another individual might be, depending on the phase that they are. So this guy or woman wants to make more money to pay off student debt, right? The next individual has got small children, and they want to get funds available to be able to provide their children with the opportunity to go study at the university. And the next individual just say, okay, you know what? If we can brand me more properly, I can increase my unit price, so I can do less volume and have more time available either for myself or with my family. So, but to figure out those goals and then seeing the business owner achieve them is extremely satisfying.
Yeah. That's awesome. Again, without disclosing any information that you're not comfortable with, using that last example of using branding to where they could increase their unit price, could you tell me a little bit more about kind of what went into that and how did it help that individual?
What happened is, and I had this one client that was charging $700 for coaching, right? Which is at the lower end of the spectrum, and but because she lacked the branding, she lacked the credibility. Because she lacked the credibility, she was not able to go higher in her price. Because she couldn't attract the type of client that was willing to pay the higher price. By correct positioning her and correcting the branding aspect of that, she was able to take that $700 and increase it to $1,500 and eventually $2,000, and attract clients that are willing to pay for that, because now her branding is there, her credibility is there. People know about her, they trust her, and they want to move on. They want to be associated or work and have her work with them.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense, and that's a great example of, there's so many things that can be accomplished with personal branding, and credibility is a huge part of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And what was difficult in that process?
Convincing her to up the price eventually. It's really hard to, when you initially go, start that journey, to tell somebody, well, you know what, once we're done with the branding, you'll be able to double your price. Because that individual knows the struggle that they're currently having in getting business, right? And they know that the struggles that they're currently having in closing at the price level that they are. And so to tell them that you'll be able to go to a price level of from $700 to $2,000, I don't even do that in the beginning, because people will just think, you know what, you're full of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's so, I mean, really, it's you're not only helping with the branding, you're using your kind of calm demeanor to help encourage them in a way, almost a little bit of business therapy.
It's small steps that you want to take, right? And so, when I speak to them, I always say, well, what we're going to do is we're going to do this in phases, right? And so the phase where I'm going to sit down and say, all right, you're getting the volume of people coming in is much more, and so now we have we have a scaling option, and that scaling option can now come into two forms. Either you can hire more people, or you can up your price and start pick and choose who you want to work with at the end of the day. So the price point in terms of the ticket value, that's a discussion in a later process down the line, right?
Well, and again, going back to your threefold process, like that makes sense because you're not just focused on, hey, let's make your images look better or let's, increase people's confidence in you. It's also, let's do it for the purpose of where can we move these finances so that it's
Yes.
either less work for you, more income for you, or whatever those goals are.
Yes, because a lot of the time with small and medium businesses, what you will find is you'll have a discussion in terms of this person says to me, all right, I want to arguments like 10x my revenue within the next
Hmm.
3 years, right? And then I say, well, okay, if you want to 10x your revenue, what is the monthly investment you can add? And then they will say, well, I'm tight, right? I'm tight on cash flow. Now you gotta say, okay, well, if that's the case, we need to take a step back. So now
Mm.
we need to go and look at your finances first, and we need to see why are you tight. If it's somebody in the retail space, is your inventory not moving? Are you not
Yeah.
collecting your accounts receivable fast enough? Is it if it's construction, how's your job costing? Are you guys taking deposits to get cash flow in? So that now needs to be fixed first, and then once that's fixed, we can revisit the marketing and growing further.
Yeah. I mean, that just blows my mind because like who would have thought that, finances, someone who did finances could go into marketing, right? It just usually seems like completely different departments, right?
It it
And
it it
and
it,
that
it, it,
crossover is so amazing.
Yeah, it does, and nobody wants to talk about it. I mean, like the last thing anybody wants to, or any person wants to speak to, is their own bookkeeper or accountant, especially accountants,
Yeah.
because they never have good news in terms of taxes, right? But speaking of tax season, that's around the corner. But the reality is, right, the
Uh-huh.
successful businesses integrate this. They
Mm.
understand the vital parts that each of these components play in growing your business.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's an amazing offering. I love that three kind of fold system that you've developed. So for those who are interested, where can they go to learn more about or sign up to converse with you about the potentials of having Darwin Digital Media help them with their brand? Where should they go?
So the easiest way to do that is to go onto the website darwindigitalmedia.com and just send me an email to info@darwindigitalmedia.com. That email goes to my oldest son, Daniel, who's working with me.
Mhm.
He's my communications manager. And what he'll do is he'll quickly reach out and provide you with a booking link, and we can just hop onto a quick discovery call to find out what you're interested in doing, and if and how I can help you.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much for taking the time to talk today, John. I loved hearing your process and loved kind of seeing that unique blend of, brand or, finances, which typically is not a very attractive element, combined with the branding, which is the attractive element. I mean, that's a phenomenal mix.
Well, Weston, thank you so much for having me on the show today. I truly appreciate being here.